Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. This video is titled Adam's Heel, and so let's first discuss, as sometimes I do, the title, okay? So the name of the video, like why Adam and why heel, you might ask, well, Adam is a person, supposedly, according to Bible, who named all the living things on earth, right? Or in the universe or whatever. And actually, like you might argue, it's not just a person. It's like the very name means like just a man or people in Hebrew or something like that, which would make sense because it's the people who name all the things because only people can speak, right? Or at least speak like in a verbal language, even though it's a tautology. And why heel, you might ask? Well, because it's a reference to Achilles' heel, right? So it's sort of a weird concoction of Adam and Achilles, and Adam naming things and Achilles having a vulnerable heel. And we'll see later why this is a heel actually very soon in a few minutes. So, and here's the next level of tautology. I hope you appreciate that. If you're like a fan of this channel or whatever, like, I've just discussed the name of the video, and the video itself is about naming things, okay? So dealing with names and the issues connected with them. And it's sort of like an offshoot of my like alternative science coaching because it's very connected to that, and I'll reference it a few times in the next few minutes. So let's start off with a simple statement that naming of a thing, like anything or anything, is essential. It's an essential part of recognition of the thing in the first place, right? So if you remember our previous studies, I've talked a lot about how objects are being constructed from essentially networks, essentially like combinations of things which like fuse into a single entity, right? So in order to recognize this sum of things, sum S-U-M of things as a single entity, we need to have a name, we need to have a label for it, right? So in particular, I think I talked about it in video Mythology as Cultural Basis and some others along the way, and obviously, as usual, I'll link all of them in the description, all of the videos I mentioned in this video, I mean. So construction of objects like cannot work without naming, right? Naming is like the icing on the cake, the sugar coating on the top, so to speak. But, and that's the main point of this video, and hence the heel thing, names are inherently dangerous, and that's a big revelation that we can observe, like we can have from experiencing Planescape Torment video game. And I mean, this game is, well, firstly, it's my favorite game, or maybe now my second favorite game after Disco Elysium, but it's like they're very close. So anyway, I wanted to actually make a separate video about it, but it's actually a piece of art. It's not an idea in itself, or rather it contains many different ideas and concepts and aesthetics. So hence you can't make a video about any separate concept from there, or actually maybe you can, but it's kind of rough. But maybe I will. I don't know. I mean, it's just it's a whole universe basically in itself. And it's kind of esoteric also. So it's kind of I don't know. I'll think about it. Maybe I will someday. So anyway. In this game, the main protagonist is literally called Nameless One, and basically their objective is to learn their name or something to that effect. Not really, but I mean, I don't want to spoil. I mean, it's so beautiful. I mean, you just have to experience it. It's so deep. So anyway, one of the people there tells you, the nameless one, that oh, you don't know your name. It's such a happiness, actually. It's such a blessing not to have a name, you know, because names are dangerous. You can be traced by your name, you know. Various like grateful people can find you, you know, and express their gratitude to you, you know, etc., etc. So returning, like winding it down a little bit, returning to my thing about alternative science, like if you have a theory, like an alternative theory, so naming it might be dangerous as well, inherently unsafe at the very least, right? So okay, let's sugarcoat this a little bit, like add a little bit of positive. So giving a name to an object makes it like durable. It solidifies it, right? It helps it to propagate through culture in a way. So if you have a name for your theory, certainly it can reach more people because, well, for various reasons, it would make it more searchable. Certainly, it would make it more like, yeah, well, in abstract terms, it really just solidifies it, if you know what I mean. But it also labels it, like putting a death mark on it for anyone who is unpleased with it, like for anyone who wants to attack it, because now they have a clear mark, you know, like a sniper scope on it, etc. And they can easily tell, okay, this XYZ name is pseudoscience, you know, and watch my video about pseudoscience, where I claim that it's a political concept and not a scientific concept, but whatever. So this is the main point of this video, that why Adam and Heal is because naming yourself or your product is actually inherently unsafe. It makes you vulnerable. So this is pretty much the main point of this whole video, okay? But we can ruminate on it some more as usual. So naming your product or yourself even, or like, yeah, like Eugene the philosopher is a name, right? It's a label, right? So doing things like that, it's very superficial, right? It gives you a surface. Like I remember this quote of Nietzsche, who said that like only the surface makes things visible, right? You can't look into deep of things because things have no deep. They only have surface, right? To observe. Like the depth is unobservable inherently. And so, well, I mean, here we're kind of getting into the realm of poetry. And actually this video is like kind of poetic, really. And I hope you will appreciate or like feel that towards the end. Like when you watch it in full, I hope you'll get a feeling rather than like intuitive understanding of what I'm saying, rather than rational like reason and arguments and stuff, even though I'm giving you rationale and reasoning as again like a skin suit, like an external excuse for what I'm saying. But hopefully you get both of those. I really hope for that. So anyway, naming things makes them superficial, like it gives them surface to be penetrated by external attackers or to be cherished by external observers, let's say, like admirers, maybe. And hence, this superficiality, this external flair, or I don't know, makes it also easy to dismiss, right? Makes it easy to attack. And by the way, I'm only talking about a good name, right? If you give your theory or whatever, your product, a good name, if you give it a bad name, well, you're like doubly screwed, right? So you have not only the inherent problem of naming making you vulnerable, but also like just purely bad naming makes you like detestable. Like, I don't want anything to do with this, you know, kind of sentiment from the public. So there's a saying in Russian, and I'm gonna give it to you literally. It goes like, as you name a ship, so it will float, right? And I've tried to find an English analog, and I've only found like, give a dog a bad name and hang him. And I don't think it's a proper translation, because it has a different meaning, right? It means, like, the English thing means like, if you have a bad reputation, basically all of your following actions would be judged accordingly, right? But this is not what the Russian saying means. Russian saying explicitly talks about the names, right? If you name your ship poorly, your ship will sink, essentially, right? So this is what I'm talking about. And this is a thing I've talked about, I've touched rather briefly in my video about Ekaterina Mykronova, right? I.e. the video called Ben Davidson and Suspicious Observers, where I discuss his Mykronova hypothesis. So Mykronova is a really bad name, even if the concept is actually, well, it's decent, let's say. I mean, it's believable at the very least, okay? And think about labels like Flat Earth. Like, you can be called Flat Earther if you deny the CRNVRS, not carnivores, by the way, VCCNS, right? See my previous videos for why am I doing this? Abjad power, hashtag. So, yeah. So there's this, like, a bad name is not helpful. Like, a name might be helpful, but it also makes you vulnerable. But a bad name makes you just lose every battle you can try to fight, right? Something like that. And in art, or maybe like some other similar areas, but I was mostly focusing on art. There is, you know, like this tendency to group artists together into like various like eras or various genres, right? More like not temporally organized, but more like technically probably organized. And in art, like labeling yourself, like I mean, I'm giving this as a particular example of what I'm talking about. So, okay. And it's really, really obvious there. Like, let's say, let's look at a particular example. Let's say one artist, like rock band or whatever, like musical collective, let's put it more generally, identifies themselves as a death metal band or whatever. Why not? Then they kind of subscribe to this larger label of death metal, right? It's already an established, well-established label. There's like thousands or even like tens of thousands of bands all over the world, or even hundreds of thousands of bands playing death metal. And it's a very established, well-constructed object. It's like a huge community all over the world, etc. And so if one artist, by some mistake or by some critic's opinion or by some, I don't know, music aggregator's opinion, is being labeled as playing death metal, then one person might say, okay, you might say, what do you think about the band XYZ? And they would say, death metal, I don't like this. I don't listen to death metal. So they may not even have heard a single song of this band, but since the band is labeled as death metal band, the guy wouldn't even try to listen to them, right? So this is what I call, and this is my you know, like one of many of my inventions in terms of naming things, right? Which I do a lot in my videos. It's what I would call deductive denial. So what is deductive denial? We have experienced certain instances. It's actually sort of both inductive and deductive, but in this case it's particularly deductive. We have listened to a bit of death metal and we say, okay, I don't like this, like, screw that. Then somebody labels something as death metal and you deduce from that, it's a logical deduction from the general to the partial, from the general to the special case, right? It's called deduction. You say, okay, I don't like this because it's labeled as death metal and I don't like death metal. Even though they might have liked this particular band, since the band is in the realm of death metal, they are being denied by this person right away, right? Without even trying to listen to them. It's obviously kind of efficient in terms of organizing your time. Like, if they position themselves as death metal, why would I listen to them if I don't like death metal, right? So it makes sense. But in general, this phenomenon, I would call it deductive denial. And sometimes people may be like accidentally be victims of that, right? Like, if somebody labels something else, like larger than this particular instance, and they are actually not, or they don't want to be, they still would be denied by a lot of people because they are associated with this larger area. I mean, a proverbial example of like fascism and Hitler, you know, you're a fascist. It means I'm putting you in this big label of fascism, which is bad, right? Hence, you're no longer viable. So get the hell away from here, right? Okay, but anyway, it's deductive denial. So if something belongs to a larger label, a larger domain which has a label, you deny it because it's deduction. I deny the larger domain, hence I deny this particular instance of it, right? And it's very prevalent in art, as I've said. Like, I have a friend from whom I'm kind of taking like my really good friend, one of my like 3 best friends actually, from whom I'm taking the inspiration of for this point. Okay, and actually it's kind of it's connected to my video Square Pegs, my recent video where I've talked about like classification of stuff, right? People might misclassify stuff, or like intentionally or accidentally, or just because they don't want what to do with this, whatever. Anyway, so here we talked about, I mean, in the previous segment, like previous, 15 minutes maybe? I don't know. We talked about the dangers of like the heel, right? Of naming yourself specifically. And here I want to like give again some poetic take on this. So giving something a name is like a fly strategy. So there's a fly in your face. It's like bzzz, it's like annoying. It like sits on your shoulder and like, get away from me. And then it sits on your like lap and you're like get away from me, especially in the summer, obviously. And so it's a fly approach. It's a label. It's very recognized. It's in your face, you know. But there might be a different strategy, which I don't even know how to call, and I just randomly arrived at snake. I don't know why. It's just like, why not? You know. So fly is like bzzz in your face, and snake is just like, you know, it's just like chilling in the bushes or whatever, in the grass. And then it's just like waits for its victim or possible victim for some time. I actually don't know whether snakes do that. It's just, again, it's just like whatever kind of poetry. I haven't studied the subject, so don't quote me on that. But maybe snakes do that. Probably. I don't know. I have no idea. But let's just have this opposition of a fly strategy versus snake strategy. So snake strategy is like covert, right? And fly strategy is in your face. So fly strategy is to be labeled, and snake strategy is to evade being labeled, to camouflage yourself if you wish. Maybe you can come up with other better examples. But anyway, I call it snake strategy, so there you go. And there's a quote from Sun Tzu, and of course, I wouldn't be your best, best-selling, self-help, business, whatever, coaching author if I wouldn't give you some military quotes from like ages ago. So Sun Tzu in The Art of War said that, if I determine the enemy's disposition of forces while I have no perceptible form, I can concentrate my forces while the enemy is fragmented. The pinnacle of military deployment approaches the formless, for if it is formless, then even the deepest spy cannot discern it, nor the wise make plans against it. Okay, so it's an idea, end of quote, by the way. It's an idea of like not putting a label on yourself, right? Not putting like a garrison of troops with a huge banner in front of the border, but rather like fragmenting your troops and like maybe very quickly concentrating them where you need them, right? So that the enemy cannot even know in advance where you're concentrating your forces. So it's a kind of a good strategy, and in one of my previous videos, I can't even remember which one because it was a completely random side rant. I talked about Napoleon's campaigns in Italy, in particular, or Stonewall Jackson's campaign in Shenandoah Valley, and well, other stuff. Actually, oh damn. Okay, well, those kinds of things, okay? I've talked about this concept of defeat in detail, but alright, let's just throw it out the window. I've already talked about that in one of my previous videos, like a very long time ago, like maybe a year and a half or something like that. The point relevant to this video is that there is one strategy is to like label yours. Oh, by the way, from modern military history, like if you look at World War I, people were still, like, officers were, like, clearly officers. They had, like, super pompous uniform, and people were marching, like, in these huge battalions, etc. But with the invention of the machine gun, it all pretty quickly stopped. Actually, happened before World War I. So all these battalions were quickly, how would you call it, scythed down, basically, and had to bunker down, like literally in the trenches. So the first days of World War I were extremely bloody. And then people realized, okay, we actually need to develop a different strategy. And in World War II, people were already using camouflage. Right, we're not just marching into the enemy. That kind of sucks, because they just kill us then. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. It's the difference between, let's say, Franco-Prussian War of 1870 or 71, or both actually, versus World War II, or even like later wars where, like in Franco-Prussian War, it was still like an old-fashioned war with like these, lines of infantry walking into each other and just gunning each other down. And in World War II and after, it was like more like people like trying to find cover and stuff, and like generally hide their emotions, right? So it's a very big difference. And yeah, and the modern day, I would say, actually requires this sort of modern approach of camouflaging yourself, right? And as I've said in my previous video, was it the previous? I don't know. I'm kind of confused because, again, at any moment in time, there's 2 videos only available at Patreon, 2 new videos. And I'm kind of like, each time I record a new one, I add one on Patreon and I publish one of the previous ones openly, right? So I don't even know at this moment. Like, New Segregation, the video was called. I think it's literally the previous one, like before this one. By the way, I'm recording this video on February 16th, 2022. Just FYI, like, for you to understand where I'm at, basically, at this point. So, in modern day, obviously, this sort of camouflaging, this sort of anonymity helps a lot. And in New Segregation video, I've actually mentioned this, at least briefly. So, the less traces you leave today, the better, basically, the safer you are, right? And I'm kind of remembering this Shawshank Redemption sort of quasi-meme, internal meme of the video anyways, where they've had Randall Stevens, a man who only exists on paper, you know, sort of this fake identity type of swag, if you know what I mean. And I'm also remembering the salting of data, the concept that James Corbett have introduced. James Corbett from Corbett Report. By the way, I think his channel was recently deleted by YouTube, just as he predicted, which is not surprising. Or he could have deleted it himself and made it like a big scam out of it. I don't know. I haven't followed it, actually. So what is salting of your data means, according to him, is like adding, you know, bits of misinformation, like this salt, which is inherently a poison, right? Adding bits of misinformation to your actual information in various like online forms, like giving them fake birthday, giving them a fake last name, giving them a fake email address. I mean, sometimes it's not viable because they require confirmation and whatnot, or maybe like one-time email address just for registration on this website, whatever. I mean, I'll actually probably link even his, the video was deleted. There's at least one page where it's available, because I actually watched it today to confirm. Actually, I wanted to know his name, if anything. So it's James, yeah. Which is actually kind of funny in the context of this video, and specifically this paragraph of the video, like this segment of the video where I talk about anonymity, because it's James Corbett. It's clearly a label, like clearly identifiable and targetable name, and it's salting of data, which is a clearly identifiable and targetable concept, etc., etc. So it's a meta irony of the next level, if you wish. Okay, so yeah. But anyway, one thing I wanted to note with regards to that is that, again, as I've mentioned already in New Segregation video, the elites are largely hidden, right? You don't know their names, you don't know who they are, you don't know any whereabouts about their families, or the ones you know are probably fictional anyways, right? Look at the biographies of Soviet leaders, for example. They're all made up. Like, they literally make no sense, absolutely. Like, their last names are all made up. Like, it's a long story. But I'm pretty sure that in other parts of the world, it's kind of the same, right? Like, their places of birth are all made up, not made up, but fiction. Well, I mean, it's real places, but they're not real, if you know what I mean. Not true birthplaces, that's what I'm saying. So, yeah, there is an informational asymmetry of this sort, that the elites are actually hidden. We don't know who they are. We know that they are there, sure. I mean, it's obvious that they're there, but we don't know their whereabouts. Like, so there's this information asymmetry. They know a lot about us with all the intelligence services and now web pages and stuff like social media, but we don't know about them almost anything. We only see their public appearances, sure, and maybe something they post voluntarily for us themselves. but not much else, right? And I'm not only talking about public figures. You don't know anything about like lead operatives of CIA or MI6 or whatever, right? We know nothing about. We don't even know, like, we can't even identify them, like the object, let alone the name, right? Well, object, subject, I mean the person. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So it helps them a lot, surely, because they are untargetable, since they are hidden, since they are invisible, essentially, camouflaged, right? And in terms of like returning, I'm kind of wrapping up this paragraph about anonymity. So returning to the issue of distributed power, like fragmented deployment of military, right? I really like the idea of like Swiss Army, and not Swiss Army per se, like actively serving. I actually don't even know if they have an army. But what I do know is that anyone who had military training in Switzerland, males at least, have a firearm. And imagine today trying to capture a city, let's say a city of 500,000, 100,000 of whom, like adult males, have firearms. This is impossible. Like, it's absolutely impossible. You can't fight those people. Like, what, you're gonna enter the city and like every window is potentially a lethal threat for you? Like, what, are you gonna storm every like building, like every, apartment potentially being killed again? Like, you can probably bomb this place, like shell it to the ground, yeah, sure. But then what's the point? Like, you gain nothing from it. You kill a lot of people and destroy everything, but then there's nothing left, right? So waging war against such a nation is basically pointless, right? So it is the thing. I mean, that's how national defense should work. You don't even need an army for that. You just arm your people and that's it, right? And they become unconquerable. But of course, if you have a shitty government that imposes shitty measures in interests of shitty elites, I'm not saying that Swiss elites are good, by the way. I think they have different mechanisms of projecting their shittiness on their citizens. But I mean, it's a separate case anyway. So let's just finish this here. I mean, I'm already like so deep into this digression that I need to bail out. What are the possible countermeasures from labeling making you inherently vulnerable? Well, we're trying to submerge means going down, like upmerge, I don't know, lift up back to the surface from these depths, back to the surface of our topic and our argument. So what are possible ways to avoid this inherent vulnerability that is being granted to you by labeling yourself or naming yourself? Well, one thing is that maybe somebody else can give your thing or yourself a name. That's one possibility. Like, if you motivate them, if you know what I mean, maybe they will, like some famous person. Or even better, if you just do your thing, like in a Sun Tzu -snake -camouflage type of manner over decades, not trying to accumulate it into any single entity, any meme if you wish, but just doing your work slowly and steadily, and then like a century later somebody says, aha, this can be labeled as such, and like accumulates you into a single like impenetrable ball of awesomeness, something like that. That's one way of doing things. However, culture anyway cares more about ideas and like networks of ideas, well, memes basically, rather than people, and hence the strategy is kind of questionable at the very least, right? Firstly, again, you need to exit an epoch to sort of have a ground to stand on to even observe the epoch and give a name to it. What kind of analogy I can bring? I don't know, really. I can only give you an example. So, as I've mentioned again in some of my previous videos, I don't remember which ones, but I think I gave this example at least a couple of times, that before modern times, and that is like 17th century, roughly speaking, and after that, like especially Enlightenment era, there was no concept of tradition, because when you live in a traditional society, everything around you is tradition. And you think it's just the way of life, it's just the way of the universe, it's just how things go, right? It's only after you exit the epoch of, well, not the epoch, like after you transition to a society of modernity, which rejects tradition, like by even its very name, it's modern society, it's not previous society, then you can speak about tradition. We say, okay, we're modern now, and this is tradition, this is what has been before, right? So it's only from this new ground you can label the previous era. That's what I'm talking about. Hopefully it's understandable. All right, let's go up one more level and actually bring us closer to the conclusions. So currently, obviously, what is most popular, like cultural product, is memes, right? And in general, we're living in a sort of a label-oriented era or whatever, media, at the very least, medium, let's say, label-oriented medium. And hence, naming of things is extremely important. Naming of yourself is extremely important. Like some people, like Rollo Tomasi, talk about, by the way, it's not his real name, which is a snake strategy, right? It's Randall Stevens, which only exists on paper. So he talks about hustle economy, which, like, you have a social media personality, which sort of earns you money and power and attention, but it's not really you, right? It's your work. You're a clown, essentially, right? Well, let's just call things as they are. You just put on this red nose and you do this social media thing, and then you go home in your actual life and being miserable, right? That's all these people do, myself included, by the way. So it's very important to have a label for this thing. You need to have a red nose, right, for this to work. Even though you can be easily punched into this red nose, hence Adam's heel. Maybe I should have called it Adam's nose, actually. I don't know, but it would work. It wouldn't work, but it would fit this particular segment where we're at now. So even if you look at the very logistics of informational transfer today, it's web, right? It's the internet. And how do you search anything in the internet? You search for keywords, and these are labels, right? These are exactly names. These are exactly like the most the sharpest, the most recognizable thing about this particular thing that I'm looking for that I can possibly think about. Or even its very name, right? Which is indistinguishable, actually, like very distinct from everything else, right? So it's a very special name, very special label, which makes you very targetable for anyone who wants to attack you, right? So this is the Adam's heel in a nutshell, not in a nutshell, it's like orders of magnitude higher. So modern culture actually amplifies this effect, if you wish, to a lot of, to a significant degree. Yeah. So, on one hand, like naming yourself or whatever you do is very important for even existing, especially in this virtual world of memes and keywords. But on the other hand, makes you very easily targetable and killable, so to speak, right? So yeah, so maybe we need some sort of, and this is already like a poetic semi-conclusion to this rant, maybe we need some sort of like a post-name approach, where again we more or less utilize this approach of a snake rather than a fly, you know, the Sun Tzu, the elites, rather than the camouflage, rather than, you know, these pompous battalions of troops who are just getting blasted by machine gun fire. So maybe it's more powerful nowadays. Maybe anonymity is the answer. But again, it's a big contradiction with how internet works in the first place. So it's an interesting contradiction, right? People strive for anonymity on the internet, but on the other hand, how can you spread the information if you're anonymous? You can spread the information as Randall Stevens, who only exists on the internet, right? Under a fake name. So it's an entity, a recognizable one, but it's not you. It's your red nose, basically, to be hit, right? But yeah, it's an interesting topic to discuss at the very least. So I really have no answer, no clear one at the very least. But it's the one to think about, the problem to think about. So, post-name approach, what do I mean by that? It's not the face, it's not the red nose, but it's kind of the spirit, you know? It's like something distributed almost. It's something, collective subconscious. It's like the ideas that all the people think and the emotions they all feel, but nobody can quite express maybe yet. But then again, to express them, you have to distinguish yourself somehow so that you would be noticed. So it's a very, very difficult contradiction. But then again, if those ideas were present, and obviously they would manifest themselves somehow in this era, in this society, then they would be noticed at the very later, right? And recognized as such. Because the later epoch would be slightly, at least slightly different. And they would say, okay, these people in 2022 were thinking this thing, but we now think differently, right? And so these people can be labeled as blah, 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 while we can be labeled as post blah, blah, or like, something like that, like anti blah, 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 or whatever. So big things like these distributed ideas all over the society can only be observed and named at a distance. Like again, I gave you the example of tradition. All right, let's just conclude this rant. So here I talked about essentially Adam's heel, which is like Adam's is relating to names, and heel is vulnerability, right? Achilles' heel. So names, like giving yourself a name makes you vulnerable, targetable. But at the same time, it is kind of necessary to spread your ideas, because without a name, you or your theory will not be able to be found by anyone, really. They could be only maybe communicated by some intuitive this sort of quasi-creeping, quasi-subconscious type of way, right? Poetic, artistic, quasi-mythological almost kind of way, right? And this is what I talked about at the very end. And so, yeah. So labeling is inherently superficial and hence easily to dismiss, hence my fly analogy, right? Then I introduced the concept of deductive denial, which is especially prominent in art, but not only, when you have a label like death metal, and one rock band, let's say, identifies themselves. By the way, rock band is also a label in itself. They identify themselves as a death metal band, and somebody would deny even listening to them for the first time just because they identify as a death metal band, and the person says, I don't like death metal as a whole, right? Even though they probably haven't listened to like 99.9% of death metal bands, they just listened to maybe 3 or 5, and they said, okay, I don't like this kind of music. So it's another instance of names being kind of detrimental to you, right? Labeling yourself under this bigger umbrella. What else did I talk about? Alternative approach is to not have a name, is to be like spread out, fragmented, unrecognizable, be water, you know, like Bruce Lee said, etc., which I call snake strategy. Snake is kind of watery, you know. And in modern day, obviously, this corresponds to anonymity on the internet, which is very contradictory to the need to be recognized on the internet, which is like a current engine of social networks and hostile economy, as Rollo Tomasi calls it. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I talked about. I think that's enough for today. And right now, I'll probably record one other exclusive Patreon short. It's gonna be like maybe under 2 minutes, maybe even under 1 minute. We'll see. I just need to make an add-on to my previous video. Like, I really need to make it, so I'll make it. So, and it's gonna be available on Patreon most likely tomorrow if I'll edit it in time. And this video would be as well, which would be February 17th, 2022. Okay, I guess that would be all. Again, subscribe to my Patreon. You can donate through PayPal. This is also very appreciated. And thank you for watching. The eons are closing.